Perfect. All right. Thanks, Eliza. So I am just gonna go ahead and call our meeting to order. My name is Kaliska. I am one of the co-chairs of the Portland Utility Board. So under Portland City Code and state law, the Portland Utility Board is holding this meeting electronically. Board members and relevant city staff are attending remotely, electronically, or by phone. And the city has made it available for the public to listen to the audio broadcast of this meeting. The meeting is being recorded. The public will have an opportunity to provide comments during the public comment portion of the agenda and can also provide written testimony to the board by emailing the address shown. This is a statement we read before all of our meetings. Is the pub belief values anti-racist principles. Pub believes and acts upon anti-racist principles in our meeting spaces and interactions with pub. While every person has the right to share their personal perspective, we stand against wrongful conduct, particularly any conduct that is targeted toward people that are made vulnerable by systemic inequities. This means stepping up as a community when there is wrongful conduct and fostering a space of learning and growth. So putting these principles into action, we ask that people speak up and speak out. Each person is empowered to maintain the culture of the utility board. Focus on the impacted individual or the population and condemn the conduct, not the person. Amy?
Thank you, Kaliska. My name is Amy, and I will quickly run through the meeting guidelines. Please state your name before you speak, and if appropriate, the name of the person you are addressing or that you're addressing the group. The chat box is only viewable by the hosts, the pub staff, Eliza and myself. So please limit any chats to technical and logistical issues, including signing up for public comment, asking for technical assistance, or reminding us that you have been waiting to speak. The raise hand function is primarily used by the board. Co-hosts may lower your hand once you've begun speaking to maintain the flow of the conversation. During public comment periods, the public can raise their hands and you will be called on when appropriate. If you're connecting by phone, please press *9 to raise your hand. Videos may be turned on for the board, presenters, and facilitators when speaking. If desired, it's not required. Members of the public and others should leave videos off. Please mute your microphone when you're not speaking. Members of the public will be muted except when giving public comment. If you're using the phone, please press *6 to mute and unmute yourself. The public comment will be taken during the comment period early in the meeting. You can sign up through chat with pub staff or raise your hand during the public comment period. It's also available just prior to any formal board vote after a motion has been made and seconded by board members. As mentioned, this meeting is being recorded. Back to you, Kaliska.
Thanks, Amy. So we have I want to say a light agenda, but it's in reality, it could not be a light agenda. So we'll have just a quick disclosure of communications and any public comments. Then we're going to talk about the initial budget letter. So I do want to emphasize that because of timing, we do need to get this letter done today and any decisions made today, sort of consensus. Amy is going to go more into depth when we get to that portion, but it's just something to keep in mind. So we have a good portion of this dedicated to it for those that are new. And I think Amy will remind us, but again, this is just an initial budget letter on basically how we prioritize, how we look at budget programs. So we have another letter that comes later, if you guys remember, but I think Amy will go into that. So that is going to be a bulk of our discussion today and decision points. And then if we have time, we'll talk about our next meeting. I believe we have some updates from things that have just kind of been in the background for February 1st. So then we'll also, if we have time, to talk about just sort of the prioritization and what we as the board have been discussing as far as making priorities. So if there's no questions at this point, We'll go into disclosure of communications, but before we do this, since we're slowing these meetings down a little bit, I just wanted to give people a chance to say hello or say hi. You know, we don't get a chance to talk. So if there's anything, questions or just, hey, how's it going? Like, happy new year. So if there's, along with your disclosures, so feel free to chime in. So I'll start with Tom.
Thank you, Kaliska. I really appreciate that. Hi, everybody. First, I've been feeling today, I thought, gosh, one of these days, I hope we can somehow meet in person somewhere, some way, maybe in a park or outside, I don't know what. But anyway, I did want to mention that I have volunteered to be on the, to offer free advice to the Bureau of Environmental Services regarding the eco-roof designs out at the Columbia Boulevard treatment plant. And so they welcomed, they were very, very gracious and said, okay, we'll take any thoughts you would like to share with us. But I wanted to mention something about that, and that is that in reviewing the letter that we're working on, that we're going to work on today, and just the first item, our first frame about racial equity, and then the second one about that talks about marginalized communities, and using that concept of centering that. So as the team is working on these projects, the eco roofs, of course, you don't have to have an eco roof to put a roof on a building. So it's kind of something that's extra. It's the city policy to put eco roofs on city buildings, but it does cost more money. And then I started asking myself, okay, how do I look at this and understand how it relates to racial equity? And that was is a real challenge. And I haven't mentioned it to the STEP team, but it is something that I thought, okay, here's what we're trying to do as a group, and how do we do it actually in practice? So I'm going to get some real experience in sort of being on the ground related to a project, and then saying, okay, do we cut these hundreds of thousands of dollars out of doing an eco roof, which nobody has mentioned. I'm saying that now as a possibility. Or do we find a better way to do it? And I thought it really related to our last meeting that we had, and a discussion where somebody at one of the bureaus had talked about costs going up and ways to deal with that by providing lower quality solutions that cost less, or not doing something, or looking at other techniques or something like that. So it seems that with all the challenges that we already have, now this challenge of these cost increases, which are happening at a higher rate than normal, throws in a whole nother challenge to the bureaus as well as to ourselves. Anyway, thanks for letting me say that, and that's it.
Thanks, Tom. Since I do work in construction, I will, if you ever want to have a discussion about eco roofs, they are problematic in a lot of ways. So, but as far as the material, this is, since we experience this daily, material availability is a huge factor right now. Just timing, trying to get material, and the cost of it is just kind of astronomical. They're like double the price that it was 2 or 3 years ago. So it's not, there's no solution, unfortunately. So there has been a lot of cost cutting measures, and a lot of clients that I have been dialing back scopes of work. So it's impacting a lot of people in a really large way. So Alex.
All right. Good morning, everybody. Yeah. So first, disclosures. I have had, since the last time I attended a meeting, a couple of contacts with BES staff, namely Jessica Terlikowski, generally regarding the Willamette Cove cleanup as part of the Portland Harbor Superfund site cleanup. So wanted to disclose that. Also, just on a more personal note, I'm hoping everybody is well and staying safe. I actually missed the last meeting because I came down with COVID while visiting family in Texas, and being fully vaccinated and boosted, as well as being really careful with wearing my mask. I was actually really surprised at how sick I got, and it's been about over 3 weeks at this point, and I'm still not quite back to 100%. So I just want to implore everyone to be as safe as possible and to take care of yourself and your loved ones, because it even with the supposedly less severe symptoms that are going around right now, that was not exactly my experience with that. So I just wanted to kind of offer that. I hope everybody is staying safe and being well. And then one last point, I just wanted to kind of speak on Tom's point that he was just talking about the racial disparities and how that might relate to an eco roof. But one of the things that Tom in my environmental justice work that we look at is the heat island effect, and that is something that eco roofs and similar construction can actually have an impact on, and there are pretty clear connections between heat island impacts and BIPOC communities, and so I just wanted to kind of throw that out there, that although sometimes there may not seem like big connections between these things, there are often ways that the ways that construction happen can impact communities, particularly communities of color. So that's all I've got. Thanks.
Thanks, Alex, and I hope you feel better. Julia.
Yeah, I have a disclosure, but I'll take a moment to say hi as well. Just in follow up to what Alex just said. I have my great grandmother is in a facility recovering from a really pretty bad injury. She broke her femur. Usually they break a hip, but she broke a femur. She's unique. And she just got tested positive for COVID as well. And so my family's going through some really, and she's been boosted and fully vaccinated. And she, thankfully, at 92 years old, isn't having any symptoms. They're isolating her. It's stressful. But like at the very least, she's doing okay. But anyway, this new variant is extremely transmissible. So I'm with you about encouraging everybody to get boosted and be safe and really just do everything you can to try to prevent the spread of this. Anyway, in terms of my disclosure, I had a conversation yesterday actually with Michelle Rodriguez from Commissioner Mapp's office. I was doing research and trying to learn more about what his office is looking into in terms of lead abatement and addressing lead issues, not just in water, but in general. And it was a really informative meeting, and I'm using that information to come up with information I'll be sharing with all of you soon about recommendations we might be able to make around some lead issues. So more to come on that later, but I just wanted to disclose that I did have that conversation this week.
Thank you, Julia. And I do appreciate the work that you've been putting into that for us and on behalf of Pub. I think I commend you on that for being able to participate. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
And Teresa.
Hi, yeah, I just wanted to disclose that I did attend a engagement session that was hosted by BPS, and it came into contact with one of the BES staff, namely Nishant. I don't know how to say his last name. And also just my usual communications through my volunteer work at DPAVE, which does include a BES staff. Yeah.
Thanks, Teresa. And I do kind of want to echo Tom. You mentioned, it'd be nice to just meet in person. And then this morning when we were preparing, I just thought, how did we do this in person before? And it just kind of made me long for the time that we were all in the room together. So hopefully someday we can all be back in a room and see each other. So I'm there with you as well. So I just want to kind of acknowledge that. I do miss seeing people and interacting in the way that we did before, but we are making the most of it. And I appreciate everybody's dedication to all that we've been able to accomplish as the pub. So I appreciate that in immensities that I just probably can't even communicate. So I think if there's no any more disclosures or if anybody else would like to say something, then we will move on. Eliza and Amy, I don't know, did we have anybody sign up for public comment?
I didn't receive a request ahead of time. And I
Okay.
also want to add that if you have a message, like typically in Zoom, you can simply message the hosts, which are Amy and I. Right now, it's letting you message everyone. And so a reminder that to message Amy and I, and if you're having technical trouble, and to not use the chat as a primary function of communication, because it's not as accessible post meeting. So if you want to share something that everyone that's not technical, please raise your hand.
Thanks, Eliza. All right. So
And
I
I
guess-
have a comment that someone is reporting from the public that their mic isn't working, so they would like the comment to be read. So I will go through the chat and I read it. The comment is, we request that Director Solmer briefly update pub today on Waterbureau's alarming 11/30/21 water lead levels, as well as approving advocates' urgent request for water filters. So far, no details have been publicly disseminated. And thanks to Oregon Health Authority for hearing our calls about providing filters.
Is Director Sommer going to give us a brief update?
was that, sorry, Eliza, was that question directed directly to Director Solmer?
That was read into the public comment.
Okay,
And so it's actually just been read into the public comment, and
okay,
Jamie has said that she's sending a response in a minute.
okay. So I guess we'll give it a second.
Mhm.
This might be something. Well, I'll let them update.
And while we're waiting, because I think Jamie's probably sending us something right now, we could go ahead and review minutes.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so in our read ahead material, we had meeting minutes from the January 4th. So I don't know if people have had a chance to look those over, if there's any corrections. Give it a couple minutes. Okay, seeing no hands. We'll let these stand as is. All right, so this is where we get to the bulk of our meeting today, and I'm going to turn most of this time over to Amy, and then I believe Kale and Karen Spencer, or was it Karen Williams? I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry.
Yes.
Okay, go ahead, Amy.
Yeah, thank you to Karen Williams and Kale Turn for the time that you took to help me with the drafting of the letter in between meetings. And all of you should have received the draft, which I will pull up in just a moment. I'm just going to leave this on the screen for a moment just to highlight a couple things. As Kaliska mentioned, the goal for today is to get to the point that the group is comfortable with a version of an amended letter that folks are comfortable enough with that you can vote to adopt either in a final form or to delegate to 1 or 2 pub members and staff to finalize by the end of this week or beginning of next week, so that we can meet the deadline to get it to the bureaus so that they can meet their deadline for submittal to the budget office. So it's a pretty quick turnaround time to meet this deadline. As we've discussed and has been sent in communications, the goal of this first letter is to focus on the kind of high level values and the frames that you're using for the evaluation of the budget requests and any early recommendations that you've been able to formulate. And so that's what the document has included so far. So give me just a moment and I will share with you the draft that we have shared. Okay, so hopefully that is large enough that you all can see it. So I'm just going to hopefully start at the beginning and we'll work our way through and we'll just kind of see where things land. We can go, unless folks have other ideas, we'll just kind of go section by section. You may have noticed that I've put some comments in. That's just where I've highlighted some of the key decision points that I knew going into the letter that there were some key decision points. That doesn't mean that there's not other ones in here that you may have flagged. So certainly as we go through, if there's somewhere else where you think that there's some key decision points, raise your hand, flag it for me, and let's have some discussion. This is the chance for us to raise any issues as we go through. So we'll just start with this first section. This is just the opening introduction to the letter. Are there any issues that folks wanted to raise in this first section? Tom.
Yeah, I have some sort of typo type things that I'm going to send to you, but the thing that is not a typo, it's something I think is, it was confusing to me. So in the first paragraph, it says the pub views this letter as the first of several touch points. The prior sentence said that we're providing this letter because it's part of the city practice. So I thought it felt a little strange that we would say we view it in this particular way because we're actually doing this because it is the city practice. So I thought that might be worded where it would say also, or however it's done, city practice views this letter as the first step, or we view this. It just felt a little awkward to me that we would say the pub when we're following the format of the pub by the fact that it's a city practice. So anyway, just that was just struck me.
Okay. Yeah, the submission for the budget letter with the requested budget is the city's practice. So, but because you serve as the advisory committee, that is the city's practice. The pub is a little bit different because you do have several touch points. That's not typical of advisory committees necessarily. You have kind of more touch points throughout the budget process than most advisory committees. So that's maybe what's a little bit different, but I hear your point about the inconsistency in the language. So I'll take note of the potential that could be cleaned up.
Thank you.
All right. Hearing no other comments, I'll move on to the section about priority areas. As you'll note, so the comment that I have on the side, this section pulls language from the work plan document. So it's been revised slightly based on the input from the volunteers, Kale and Karen, who helped with the drafting of the letter. So tried to preserve the original intent and language where possible. So there's several options to this, as you maybe saw in the letter itself. At the first 3 pages of this letter was all of the draft letter, and then at the end of the letter, just for reference, I gave you the original work plan language as well, just so that you had that for reference. So because I thought there were a few options. So the one option obviously could be to kind of go through these sections and either accept the revised language the way that it was written, go through each of these sections and maybe edit some of them if there's any minor changes that folks wanted to consider as a group. Or we could look at the original language or consider some other suggestion that you all may have. So just wanted to open the floor and see what your ideas were. So any feedback on that, Robin?
Yeah, I would be preferential to kind of going paragraph by paragraph in case anyone has a specific thing. But I didn't see any issue with that first racial equity paragraph, and I wanted to at least offer my comment on the climate crisis one, if y'all were okay with that.
Is anybody opposed to taking that approach? Tom, is that an opposition?
Yes, I would like to start. Well, I mean, we can start with whatever is suggested, but I do want to get back to racial equity if we start on climate crisis. It's okay with it. So if Robin's ready to do climate crisis, I just wanted to say I want to get back to the other one.
Okay, so I guess the question, are you opposed to just starting with this draft language and going section by section using this version in this letter? Is anybody opposed to that approach? All right, I'm not seeing any hands, so maybe let's start with the racial equity section first, and we'll just go section by section. So Tom, I think you had your hand up first about racial equity, so we'll start there, and then we'll work our way down to climate crisis next, if that's okay with you, Robin.
Sounds good.
All right, Tom, go ahead.
Okay, so I wanted to suggest that we consider removing the word systemic racism and just change it to rooted in racism. And then the next sentence, in developing recommendations, the board says will not only analyze. I think we could drop not only and just say the board will analyze the distribution of burdens and not qualify it by saying current distributions, because we are talking about past and current issues. So if we just drop the current, and say distribution of burdens, et cetera, that would allow us to cover both past and current. And then on that last sentence, distribution of burdens and benefits, and I thought we would have to adjust the wording because of taking out the previous words. And we'll consider how to advance reparative actions, and then drop that address harm by past inequities, policies, because we've already said that. So I think it's pretty much a given that consider how to advance reparative actions is related to this entire paragraph or this statement. So I'm just thinking we could help reduce the words, get this more succinct, because the people that we want to read this, I have a feeling they're very busy, and to provide a concise amount without detracting for something. So this is just the way I see it. So I'm just throwing that out there, and if it's important for others, I'm certainly in favor of keeping what I'm suggesting.
Were you suggesting that whole last section, that address harm done by past inequitable policies, actions, and practices? Is that what you were suggesting?
Yeah, I was suggesting we delete that.
Okay.
Put a period after reparative actions, because we've
Okay.
already talked about these inequities and things in the previous words that we use
Okay.
to get started.
Okay, I
So,
saw
there we
several
go.
hands go up, so let me hear from folks if there were responses to those specific edits initially. Did Karen, Alex, or Sarah, were you responding to those specific edits? Karen first?
I had a question on the change from systemic racism to just racism. I had a visceral reaction to that, and I just wanted to hear more of the why.
I looked up the word systemic because I really didn't understand what it means, and it means kind of universal or all encompassing. So I just find I'm uncomfortable if I have to look up a word to know what it means as it relates to something to me that's so important as this. So if there's another word that's maybe more descriptive, especially for the average person, and maybe I'm just not, maybe it's my limitation with the English language, but I don't know how many people know the definition of systemic when they see it. So that's why I suggested either dropping it, but if there's another word that works better, I'm certainly in favor.
Would you be in favor of institutional?
Yes, and maybe cultural, institutional. I think that gets at it. Yeah, words like that to me work better.
Okay. I have something else, but I want other people who have questions on Tom's proposed changes to ask them as well.
Alex, did you have comments on those as well?
Yeah, I actually had the same reaction that Karen just mentioned at the removal of systemic in there. To me, I mean, I guess institutional is an okay substitute for that, but from my perspective, that institutional or systemic really gets to I just think including that in there is necessary to really get at the understanding that racism is generally or is often not something that is just on a personal level, but that has actually infiltrated institutions and the systems that govern our daily lives. So if systemic is removed, I would, I guess, be okay with institutional or institutionalized racism. I don't know if I would support cultural in there because again, as we are dealing with institutions like the City of Portland and Water Bureau and Bureau of Environmental Services, I think that becomes important.
Hey everyone, Sarah Messier, Portland Water Bureau and ex officio member. I'm saying ditto to what Karen and Alex said. Systemic racism, Tom, I know you mentioned you looked up systemic, but the term systemic racism is very specific. I had that same visceral reaction. Systemic racism is very specific, and it's very specific to especially government and the harms that government has played in the past and currently. So I think institutional could work, but I can tell you in the city, saying systemic racism, like that, people know what that means. When city council sees this, they're going to know what it means. I definitely encourage you to keep doing that research and finding out, like, looking up what racism is and really understanding what that is. I also had a very visceral reaction to the deletion of the last sentence. The whole point of equity work is to be specific. And so calling out specific things that have caused harm and cause inequities is super, super important. And I don't want to remove those specifics in this section. This is something that this racial equity is something that is obviously I have a lot of passion about it. This is something that guides a lot of my work in the Water Bureau. And I really think that, like, cutting words here doesn't really make sense. If anything, like we really want to have a solid statement around why we're centering racial equity and how we do that work in the board.
Teresa?
Hi, yeah, I also, well, Sarah already kind of said what I was going to say, is that institutional racism means something very different from systemic racism. So when we are learning about equity, when we're having equity trainings, there's actually 3 very specific levels of racism, which is interpersonal, institutional, and then systemic racism. And here we're really not just addressing institutional racism, but also, like what Sarah said, when it comes to governmental settings, we're really addressing that systemic racism. And I don't think that there is another word that can specifically substitute but for the word systemic. But I was trying it really hard to think about another word that could represent systemic, and the closest I could come to is society or societal racism. But I still think that systemic racism is something really specific. And I would also encourage Tom to look up the equity trainings done by Deron Coles, which I don't want to get too personal here, but I just know that Tom has went through a training with EGI with Deron Coles, and those materials are actually really nice to review. And sorry if I'm being too personal here. I would also say the last sentence that was called out for deletion here, I do also think that it is pretty important to call out, what exactly has been done by our governments in the past that are causing harm, specifically the policies and practices that have been done in the past. And I think those are really important to call out.
There's a couple more hands raised, so I want to hear from a couple more people, although I did hear from Tom the suggestions, but also the acknowledgement that that if these were some of the suggestions for deletions or changes, that if others had strong feelings about them, that they that he was open to changes. And I have heard from I think enough people that there's probably I think I've heard from maybe what would be the majority of you. I'd have to count how many of you that maybe we should take a straw poll or show of hands about leaving systemic in rather than changing it to institutional. But I think I heard more folks advocating for leaving systemic than changing the word. Does that, let's see, a thumbs up, a couple thumbs ups. Okay, so I'm going to, at least for now, change it back. But maybe I'll leave these notes and flags in here. And we will continue these conversations, and we can come back to this if we feel that the issue is unresolved. Karen, you still had more about this section, so let's come back to you, and then we'll continue with Julia and Kale after that.
So I wanted to add, and I realize that part of this exercise is to trim, but this is the one thing that I want to add, and I thought this was the appropriate spot for it, is maybe to start that section off with a reference to the beliefs, values, and anti-racist principles. So we could say something like, consistent with the pub's beliefs, values, and anti-racist principles, comma, and then continue the sentence. And then ideally we'd have a link to those principles that if the bureaus or whoever reading the letter wanted to see them would be able to view them easily.
It's a great idea. I just put the XYZ in there because I don't remember the exact title, so I will replace that with the exact title. Julia?
Oh, I should have lowered my hand. The straw poll pretty much addressed.
Okay.
I was just gonna say what they said.
Okay, great. Kale?
Hi, thank you. You know, I want to echo what everybody was talking about, you know, removing the word systemic. I kind of have some reservations about that because I feel like systemic represents more of a, like, all across the board, everyday, facets of our everyday lives and everything. And that's what we wanted to. Also, the removal of that lessons. I also think that, you know, it's important to be specific in a sense that we state to address harm done by past inequities. I mean, reparative actions are great, but we also have to, I think, consider looking at not just but really specific policies that were, that were inadvertently, inequitable and unintentionally inequitable, and looking at undoing those and also going a little bit further. I think just, kind of without that sentence, I think reading it as just, that we want to undo the harm that is done doesn't go far enough. That we have to undo the harm that is done and also consider other things that are that are going to help make improvements. So I think that last sentence added on kind of indicates that.
Great, thank you, Cal.
So Amy, sorry, I don't know if I could just quickly, because I know that we kind of want to get consensus. So I guess it sounds like there's kind of a want to keep the last one, keep systemic. So at this point, if there's anybody is there anyone who is not comfortable if we add the consistent with PUMS anti-racism, if we leave systemic, if we remove the current and then leave that last sentence? Are the edits that Amy has on the screen, is there anybody that is opposed to those at this point? Okay, not seeing any hands.
All right,
Perfect.
let's move to climate crisis, and maybe we'll start with Robin. I believe you had something you wanted to raise in this section.
Okay, I was muted that whole time. I was trying to figure out my camera. But yes, with the climate crisis and climate justice, I thought that this paragraph adequately, or was the starting to successfully address climate justice, but not specifically, I guess, the climate crisis in the means of what the Bureau itself can do, and not specifically how they can change their climate justice approach. And my note was specifically about the Bureau taking an active stance in their processes and their business practices to minimize their carbon footprint as a Bureau. And that way it's both on what they're doing in the building that they work in, what their choices are as a Bureau, and also when they step into the community to make sure that the people who are most impacted by these issues are affected. And so to me, it just felt like the header of this paragraph was addressing like a two-part thing, both the climate crisis and climate justice. And that I just wanted this paragraph to maybe have like a sentence specifically to add, to reflect how the Bureau itself can reflect on their practices, but also their forward-thinking solutions. Hopefully I'm saying this in the right way.
Do I have permission to move it?
This is Eliza. I think oh, good. Alex, I accidentally lowered your hand.
I was wondering about that. Is it okay for me to go? Or are you
Yes.
still
Yeah,
typing?
go ahead.
Okay. Well, I just wanted to kind of, I think, echo what Robin was part of what Robin was trying to get at. To me, I think that I like the language. I would suggest taking out so-called solutions and maybe put in something like climate resiliency. The so-called part, it seems a little something to me. But yeah, I also support kind of including in this statement something that talks a little bit about just the ongoing climate crisis kind of in a larger sense. It could even go so far as to reference things like the recently passed climate protection plan that at the state level. We've got lots of climate crisis declarations on the state and local levels. So I'm just wondering if there's any way that we could kind of call that out in this section as well. So yeah, that's it.
Do Robin or Alex, do you have a suggestion of a sentence, or maybe want to do some thinking on crafting something? And maybe we'll go to Tom next.
Thanks. This is Tom. I agree with Robin and Alex and how they're talking about that. What strikes me is, so if they come up with a sentence that would be great. I was concerned about two things. One is the reference to marginalized communities. And it's not that we're referencing marginalized communities, but we're introducing this phrase. And is that phrase encompassing all of what we said in racial equity, as well as what we didn't say in racial equity? And I'm getting at the issue of, for instance, other issues that we want to make sure there's fairness in, such as age, for the aging population of Portland, and those vulnerable who are elderly, and are they being covered? So I find that marginalized communities seems to need, it's almost like, do we need to have a statement about marginalized communities separate as a value. And then the other thing was with regard to the work, I was noticing in our past interactions with BES, for instance, and some of the questions that came up. So for instance, is BES prioritizing green solutions which provide, urban heat island reduction, carbon sequestration, and et cetera, versus just in terms of infiltrating water versus what they call a sump, which is a piece of concrete cylinder that's placed under the road, and thinking about equity and marginalized communities and BIPOC communities, a lot of places where they can do sumps, none of this greenery would be installed because it's all under the road. So are they systematically, you might say, or institutionally looking at it saying, well, we can get the most water in the ground by using a sump, and the green facility is not quite as good, but the green facility does provide all the other benefits that are associated with climate and with making a nicer place. So anyway, so in this, that is an issue I think that is, to me, related to what Rob and Alex were bringing up, is that it seems we need to have some way to get at this technical side of climate. And, how are the bureaus really looking at it? But anyway, so that's it. So that part, plus I'm confused by the introduction of marginalized communities. I'm not opposed to that introduction. It's just that we haven't really said something specifically about what that means to us. How do we define marginalized communities? So that's it. Thanks.
So sorry, Amy, I'm going to step in really quick here. Tom, I believe at some point, and this is going back in my memory, I feel like at some point PUB did define marginalized communities, and I don't remember if it was a value discussion that we had like a couple years ago, or if it was in another letter, but I feel like we did at some point more specific, I think, in that. So I'd have to, I don't know, maybe Amy, Eliza, and I can ruminate about it, but I think at some point we had to find that. So sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. So Teresa, go ahead.
Sorry, thank you. Since there's like a question mark right after so-called, and it seems like there needs a suggestion for a word there, I was just going to say that, and I'm perhaps climate mitigation or climate resiliency solutions. I was also going to suggest of another word to replace solutions, since I feel like a lot of the practices doesn't really serve as solutions, but they're just sort of like mitigations. So perhaps practices is a word that fits better than that. Yeah, so either climate resiliency practices or climate mitigation practices. Yeah, thank you.
All right, Alex.
What about strategies, climate resiliency strategies? Teresa, does that okay? That's the word that I was when I was
yes,
making
thank you.
I
completely forgot strategy, but that is actually a good word. Thank you.
Okay. And I did want to kind of speak to a little bit what Tom was saying earlier, because to me, the innovation and efficiency section, the next section that we'll be reviewing, might be the place that, Tom, you were talking about kind of technical solutions to problems, that might be the appropriate place. We do say in there, and I'm not meaning to move on just yet, but we do say in there that advance equity, that those solutions will advance equity, and maybe it's there that might be expanded to better incorporate what your ideas were. And then finally, I just wanted to add that with respect to a more global statement about the climate crisis, I mean, it could be a sentence right at the beginning that that essentially says the pub recognizes that we are in a state of climate crisis as declared by the city of Portland and state of Oregon, or something like that. You know, just something as simple as that at the beginning of that section. And then from there, move into also recognizes that marginalized communities are disproportionately impacted.
As declared by who officially?
I'd have to go back and double check where those declarations are, but I thought there was one that was by the city of Portland, and I thought there was actually a climate crisis declaration by the state of Oregon as well. So you know, pending double checking those references.
Okay. Okay, so in the interest of time, because we are moving quickly through it, let's move on to the next section and continue to try to move swiftly so that we can get into the next sections as well. So let's move on to innovation and efficiency, and folks interested in raising any points on this section. On interagency and cross-sector collaboration.
Could I say something real quick?
Yes.
So on this particular one, I'm feeling if aside from this particular meeting, I don't want to do this now, but if anybody would volunteer to give me a quick tutorial as to how they are going to do this, I would really appreciate it, because that last sentence, the board will pay special attention to ensuring that innovations and efficiencies benefit others. I'm just wondering how others of you are seeing how we would do that, or how you would do that. And if you have a way to do it, if you would share it with me either by email or phone call or something, I would appreciate it. Thank you.
All right, Teresa.
I'm not really sure if we've gotten to the interagency collaboration yet, but since both of them are kind of short, I just want to suggest that the board will look for opportunities for collaboration and cooperation and sharing of resources such as staff and expertise. I don't feel like this sentence really address that we are trying to encourage two bureaus to have more interagency or cross bureau or public-private collaborations. I just don't feel like this sentence really captures that, and I would encourage to either change or add a sentence that really specifically calls out the bureaus to have more interagency or cross-bureau collaborations.
If I could offer a comment about, I agree with that, Teresa, and something that struck me as I was having a conversation with somebody from transportation and BES a couple of months ago about a project that was done, and neither of the people at those two that I talked to, the one representative of BES and the other of transportation, even had an idea of what to do to address climate related to the project that I brought to their attention. So it seems there needs to be something that maybe we could encourage, as I think you're alluding to, that we encourage that these bureaus do some kind of internal education and getting people on board with things that they can look for to do, not only related to climate, but to just interagency coordination that would give us better results or the more results that we're thinking about and hoping for.
Would you suggest that just as adding it here, inter-bureau and interagency collaboration, cooperation and sharing of resources, or would you, maybe we can touch base outside of the meeting and decide whether that or a separate sentence would be better. I'll connect with you and see. I'll just make a note to connect. All right.
So sorry, Amy, can we go back one?
Yeah.
So I wanted to talk to, well, Tom, I did want to, I see what you're saying here on this innovation and efficiency, where the board will pay special attention to ensuring, because I guess unless we have these sort of engineering expertise or process expertise, I think that would be sort of tough for us to do. I think maybe that's what you're asking. So I wonder if, Amy, it makes sense that the board will ask how the programs, and maybe just tack that on, like take out the first of the next sentence from the board until 2, and just make that, I don't want to make it a run-on sentence, but basically the reason we're asking about these programs and technology is to ensure that those innovations will benefit the communities.
Are you suggesting, in other words, one sentence, the board will ask how programs will use new technology and make existing systems and operations more efficient to ensure that innovations and efficiencies, does that benefit communities? Is that the idea?
Yeah, I think so. Because I mean, if I'm understanding the intention is that the reason we're asking them to talk about these is to make that we ensure that those efficiencies are benefiting the communities.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So unless I'm reading that wrong. So Kale, I think you were the one that helped craft this. Did you want to weigh in?
Yeah. So I actually, changed that line real quick, but the intention is to kind of provide like a guidance, like as you were saying, is that any type of innovation and efficiency on projects in our systems should be focused on benefiting communities, rather than just the BS or the Water Bureau. So the spirit of the sentence was really to say that, look, if you guys, come up with ideas or projects that make things more efficient, to make sure that efficiency benefits the communities that we serve. And so so I think however we say that, but that was the spirit of the that was the intention of adding that to.
Okay, I think that we can probably rearrange it. I just think we want to steer away from making it seem as if we have the technological expertise to vet those systems. So
Yeah. It's not that it's not that we are gonna that we're telling them or mandating them, but that anything that's new, any investments that we make that is focused on innovation efficiency should also benefit communities in that. We don't have the solutions for that, and we're not trying to tell them what the solution is at, but going forward to have that thought in mind.
okay, thanks. Okay, sorry, Amy, continue.
Okay, so moving on to the next section, which is about the affordability, financial assistance, and budget guidance. So this section starts by just laying out what the mayor's guidance was. And this first sentence just kind of highlights that the pub will weigh in later on any position on the mayor's guidance about the rate increase itself, because the mayor's guidance is that they maintain their rate increase with what was projected in their prior year financial plan. So it delays that for your next letter. This next section is kind of crafted based on what was in support of some of the other guidance that was in the mayor's initial memo, based on what seemed to line up with some of the things that you have supported in prior meetings, and based on the feedback from both Kale and Karen. And so we could either take this section item by item, or just kind of review the whole thing. It had the only difference between the two, we had initially crafted the rate stability and predictability, and there was difference between whether to include the predictability piece, because one of the pub members felt that the predictability piece was less of a priority for pub, so that piece maybe was not to be included. But the outreach and financial assistance programs and guidance on equity and inclusion, meaningful climate action, houselessness, and health and safety of employees, all of those things seem to line up with other priorities in your work plan. So there was just general support crafted around those priorities in the mayor's guidance. So comments on those, Alex?
Yeah, I understand if this is something that should be put off until the second letter that goes into more specifics, and I think this is probably partly because I wasn't at the last meeting to discuss this. But one of the things that I would really like to see in here is an evaluation of the charges for the Portland Harbor Superfund site that are being passed on to ratepayers in the city. I don't know if the appropriate place to do that would be this first paragraph or potentially the second paragraph. I would just like to see it in there, just because it is something that is, it is a cost that's being borne by members of the community that I don't think is clear where that's coming from, or why community members are being asked to contribute to that, based on the city's exposure to liability for cleanup costs. And it could be something that's it could be a relatively simple statement, something like the pub will also provide recommendations about ratepayer exposure to costs associated with City of Portland liability and the Portland Harbor Superfund site cleanup, or something like that. But
Karen Spencer, I don't know if you want to talk about Amy's.
Karen, go ahead.
So I think that stability and predictability are both important. Stability seems to suggest kind of containing rates, which we would love to be able to do. Predictably says if we've got rate increases that we have an understanding about it and they are predictable. And I think that is really important given the inflationary pressures and the aging infrastructure that we are dealing with. So I'm okay with taking predictability out for this letter, but I do think it is an important piece. So if others want to also have it in, I would gladly vote for straw poll for it to be in as well.
Tom?
First, I wanted to support what Alex is proposing, and that we have some kind of language that helps us get a perspective on the Portland Harbor, because I'm not sure that the methodology that BES is using to calculate the wastewater and stormwater fee that's associated, that is the extra amount that we're paying on our bills. I don't know where they came up with that methodology and stuff. So that to me is related to his issue about, and one being the fact that it could, these costs could escalate quite a bit in the future. Regarding predictability, I'm okay with leaving that in. My impression is, if I'm correct, this is something that we're sort of quoting from the mayor, and we're saying that we support it. And so I do support the idea of predictability. I think the bureaus should be looking at the future and trying to predict what they can in a world that's hard to predict, but some way of doing that. So I'm not quite sure about the reasoning to taking it out, but I'm okay with it in. And if everybody voted to take it out, I'd be okay with that too. So.
Okay, so maybe a quick straw poll on folks. Maybe just a raise of hands for folks who want to take it out, to leave predictability out of this section. Okay, so I'm only seeing one hand, so it seems that the majority are wanting to leave it in. So I guess for those who I guess the question is, yeah, Amy.
Hi, this is Amy Chomowitz with BES ex officio. So in this case, I think stability and predictability are very closely aligned. If we have rate stability, we probably have better predictability. But the other thing I want to say is I think that predictability also aligns with the Bureau's planning and sort of being very future focused and assessing what are the Bureau's needs in terms of infrastructure and programming. So I just wanted to add that to the discussion.
Okay, so I am hearing the majority wanting to leave the stability and predictability. Were there any other edits that folks wanted, or could I see a raise of hands for acceptance of this section the way that it's crafted? Although let me actually add in, let's see, we'll add in Alex's edit somewhere in here. Suggested somewhere in the second paragraph, so I am not sure where.
What about before the last sentence in the first paragraph?
Right here.
Yeah, just a suggestion. I'm not sure if that's exactly the best place to put it, but as a starting point.
Okay, I'll put it in there for now, and we can, in final edits, it could always, we'll do final reviews. Kale, go ahead.
Hey, I just wanted to comment that the reason why I wanted to take out the predictability piece is because being able to predict rate increases is different from being able to keep rates, stable where it is. So for example, we can predict, we can add on a whole bunch of projects, right? And we can predict the rate that will completely raise, increase rates for folks. But rate stability, I feel like just kind of hones in on whatever project that we take on, whatever investments that we make, that we really do the best we can to make sure that it doesn't change. So it's not much significant change. So that was the only reason why I think that the word predictability should be taken out, because predictability, we can predict how much a project is going to take and how much to spend, but not necessarily keep rates stable. So I think they were kind of more in disalignment, but that's probably just me reading it and interpreting it a different way. So I'm supportive of it, in either way.
Okay.
But the goal really is to make sure that there aren't very big, big changes in what the rates are, especially now.
Okay, so just show of hands if there's any objections to or any additional comments about this section. Otherwise, I'll continue moving so that we can move on to the additional recommendations, because we are getting low on time. This next section is primarily pulling from the recommendations. So the content itself, again, is pulling from recommendations that you've approved at prior meetings. But again, the wordsmithing, of course, we've had to rearrange the content so that it would flow into the letter. So it pulls from your debt recovery recommendations, the early general value stuff. You'll have more detailed recommendations, obviously, once you continue that conversation. So this just pulls some of the highest, I guess, the high level general value recommendations that received the majority votes at that initial meeting. So we've captured those. So let's try to get through these as quickly as possible. Actually, I see that we only have about 10 more minutes. So Kaliska, I guess I'm going to ask you your thoughts on, because we still have a full page of content. Maybe we need to do a quick poll of where folks are at as to whether they're feeling like there is a lot of content in the next sections, that they feel like there is a lot of discussion, or whether we should take interest on delegating to one or two folks to work with me on content, and that they can send me any feedback that they may have on this next section, and that we could finalize the rest of the letter. But we probably need to take a little bit of a straw poll or of where we're at, and do some sort of vote on acceptance of the edits that we've made so far, and make some decision about where to move next.
Yeah, I think so. I guess the last section we have, so if there's anybody who has, I mean, not grammatical, I guess, edits, but has edits that would kind of change the content, is there anybody who was waiting for this section to make those edits? So just seeing if there's a raise of hands, because I think if there is a raise of hands, then maybe, Amy, we have them work with you direct. Tom, did you have significant edits for this?
Oh, I don't have significant edits. I do have a few. The only significant thing, I would call it significant, is that we need an introduction to this, because we have an introduction to our priority areas, and then we immediately go into this. So I think we ought to have a sentence, or at least a sentence or a title that introduces why we're saying this, because I assume this is our first take. These are specific things we're saying that relate to the budget, such as what we've said. So before we start talking about affordability and financial assistance, that we just have an introduction to say, these are the pub's current positions, or something like that. Do you see what I mean, Amy or Kaliska?
I guess I thought that that's kind of what this section did. So you're saying that you feel like there needs to be more of an introduction between which section?
Before the title. So before you get to the title, affordability.
Up here.
Right before that, a title.
Oh, okay.
In other words, up above, we have the priority areas. We say priority areas, and then we list the priority areas. There's 4 of them, right? So we say pub's priority areas. So I think that we should have pub's preliminary position, or preliminary something, pub's preliminary positions, I guess. We are making position statements in these words that we are using under affordability. So I don't have anything in terms of getting at the specific wording, but just that we give an explanation of what we're saying, that we are saying this because this is our preliminary, and it's actually ongoing. It's kind of our ongoing preliminary. It's what we said something like this last year to some of these in the letter last year. So.
Okay.
And I'd be happy to help work on this.
Any other major content feedback that people want to raise?
Amy, this is Alex Lopez. I just put in the chat maybe some better wording for the Superfund sentence up there.
Oh, great. Thank you. All right. And any 1 or 2 volunteers to finalize the letter and make sure that I accurately capture the intent of all of the edits and the conversations that we've had during the meeting today? Tom?
Oh, yeah, I'm just volunteering.
Perfect.
Amy, and Kaliska, this is Karen Williams, and I will also volunteer to take a last look at the letter for intent.
Okay, perfect. Tom and Karen, I will connect with you outside the meeting. Okay, so maybe the final step then would be to, if somebody would be willing to make a motion to accept the letter as drafted and amended based on the comments and amendments and intent made during the meeting today, as delegated to be finalized by staff and Karen and Tom. Kale?
So I actually would prefer to vote to accept the letter as is after reading the final draft, rather than waiting for the amendments, waiting to do the amendments. I mean, approving it now and then allowing for the amendments to be made afterwards.
So I think, sorry, Karen Williams, did you want to interject on that?
No, go ahead, Kaliska, that's fine.
Well, I think timing wise, Kayla, we're not going to have an opportunity to come back and vote before it's due, if that's my understanding. Amy, am I?
That's correct.
Yeah,
This is
so
the only meeting that you have before the letter needs to be finalized, unfortunately.
Yeah, so we have to make a vote and a motion now to approve this as it's been written with the amendments, the changes that we've done, knowing that we will get a chance to look at it. Once this has all been done, it gets sent back out to the board, but we won't have time to do another formal motion to approve. So this is our only chance to do that. And we can't do approvals via email. So Karen Williams, did you have?
Yeah, Kaliska, if I may, I was going to suggest, Kale, I will relinquish my volunteer spot on final review of the letter and would welcome if you would be willing to step in and do that. Would that make you more comfortable with voting on this today?
No. I think you will be fine. So it's not that I don't have confidence that you all will do good work. It's just I'm kind of just typically unsure of. It's kind of like signing a document without reading it.
So you will get a
So-
chance to see it, right? Once this has been rewritten, and you still have a chance to say anything then. But it's just timing wise, we have to vote on this now to move it forward. Otherwise, we won't get a chance to put the letter in.
Okay, I see. No, I'm comfortable with it. As comfortable as I can be. But yeah, so I guess I suppose without any significant changes and accepting the letter as is, I'm okay with that. But if there are, or if the meaning or things get added or excluded, then I'm
The only changes that should be made are the ones that we see on the screen, and that is it.
okay.
There's
Okay.
nothing else. All the content will stay exactly the same. So that's why we went through this, is so we could edit those that we wanted, and those edits that we see on the screen will be made, and then you see the final product.
Okay, I'm okay with editing what we've agreed on. I was just a little bit concerned if we're going to be taking on like parts of it and adding additional.
Okay.
I'm okay with that.
So Tom, you have a question?
Oh, just a quick question. I'm sympathetic to Kyle's feelings, and I feel similar. But I wonder what happens if we don't submit a letter, or if we're late. What happens if we're late, or if we don't submit it? Are we? Well, what happens?
I mean, it's missing our opportunity to have a letter in front of council. So this is one of those, I mean, this is why we do the letter, is so we can get this out in front of them to make sure that they understand that like this is our priorities and this is what we're looking at through the budget cycle, and to kind of get our voice out there and heard. So
This is Eliza, and I'll add one quick piece of information that a lot of these deadlines are coming not just from the city, it's an intersection of state and city ordinance and statutes. And the city budget office has actually recognized that the timelines that we are having to operate under the budget cycle do not work very well for community. I'm not saying you can expect changes next month or even next year, but this is a recognized difficult issue that you all are experiencing right now. And your experience here is something you could choose to literally put in this letter if you all can agree quickly. Gabe would also like to have a minute of your time. the Director Solmer. So if you can agree quickly, you could literally add a sentence in here that you recommend that council, city budget office, all parties consider thinking about the budget timeline cycle.
Thanks for that suggestion, Eliza. My preference is in the interest of time. So I guess we'll ask again, is there anybody that wants to make a motion, kind of capturing what I can make? Can I make the motion?
You can.
Yes.
Okay, so I am gonna make a motion that Pub adopts this letter with the edits that we have discussed and the amendments that we have discussed, and that we have delegated this responsibility to Amy, Tom, and Karen to finalize this letter with the wording that has been approved, or approving this wording. Did I say that right?
Yeah, I will put the motion, I think.
So is there a second? There has to be a second, right?
This is Tom. I'll second your motion.
Okay. And I think we just go down the line.
Let's open for public comment first.
Oh, sorry, public comment. Not seeing any hands. Eliza or Amy, are you getting anything in the chat?
No.
Okay. So I guess we'll just go down the line. So
Karen Williams, co-chair and voting member, voting yes.
this is Kaluska Day, voting member, co-chair. I vote yes.
This is Tom Lipton, voting member. I vote yes.
This is Robin Castro, voting member. I vote yes.
This is Teresa Huang, voting member. I vote yes.
This is Alex Lopez, voting member. I vote yes.
Gabriela Cedeño Lopez, voting yes.
This is Karen Spencer, voting member. I vote yes.
I think that does it for everybody that we have. So for Kale.
Yeah, the scale term voting member, I'll vote yes to.
Perfect. Okay, I appreciate everybody that's participated. This is great. And Gabe, we're going to turn this last minute over to you.
Thank you so much, Co-Chair Day. I will be brief. I know that is an important topic to Pub and Pub members. So first, just a correction to the statement that was made at the top of the meeting. The Water Bureau did send a press release to Pub with the results of our fall lead and copper rule testing on November 30th. So Pub has seen this information, as well as sending an informative blog post on the 12th of January. And I believe that Eliza will make that available in the chat or by email to you in case anyone has lost that in their email. I'd also suggest Pub members review our website for more information about our improved corrosion control treatment facility. And Eliza can pass that link on as well. And finally, I just want to share that we are working with Commissioner Mapps to hold a town hall specifically on this topic, which may be of interest to this group and to our public members joining us. That will be in February. We are still confirming a date, and I'm happy to pass that on as soon as we have it. Thank you for the time.
Thank you so much, Gabe. All right, so our next meeting is going to be, those are our next two, February 1st and 17th. So unless there's any questions, I'm going to end the meeting. Don't see anything. Okay, thank you.